Dawn on the plateau came like a long breath of the earth, cold to the tip of the nose, clear, so quiet you could hear the grass rustling. Morgan Ellis, 38, stopped the old SUV on the bumpy path. At the top of the hill, the grey-tiled wooden house sank low into the sky. Its wooden walls faded, its porch swaying in the wind. Theo, a 10-year-old boy, clutched his backpack tightly, his eyes bright as spring water. He pressed his face against the glass, exhaling, blurring a circle. "Is that our house, Mom?" Theo asked. Morgan didn't answer right away. She turned off the phone, reached up to brush a strand of hair from the collar of her coat. 18 years away from home, 7 makeshift jobs in the city, a broken marriage. She came here with a little cash and many questions. But the moment the hill wind blew through the car window, carrying the smell of heather and young pine, she knew she had at least set foot on the right land. "Yes, my house." She smiled and opened the door. It was cold. They got out of the car and stepped on the dry, brittle pine needles. They looked up at the house. The wooden gate was sagging on its hinges. Ivy was tightly wrapped around the porch posts, and reeds were waist high. The path up to the porch was a series of lonely stone steps, many of them almost swallowed by moss. Morgan put her hand on the gate. "Hello," she said softly, like a greeting to an old person who had slept too long. The gate was hoarse, yielding. They waded through the weeds. The wind on the hill was not like the wind in the city. It was not hurried, not sharp, but thick and round, like an ancient soundtrack that crept up the spine. Morgan inserted the key into the lock and turned it patiently. The lock screeched, then clicked. Inside, the living room was covered in yellow dust. Cobwebs flowed from the corners of the walls like old lace curtains. The armchairs were sagging. The wood of the beams cracked in small lines. On the wall hung a large pine picture frame. The picture had been removed. Only the fabric remained. In the corner of the kitchen was a round coal stove, covered in a thin layer of grey soot. The smell of damp and old wood mixed together, greasy and familiar. Theo inhaled sharply. "I smell winter," he said. Morgan opened all the windows. The wind rushed in, the frayed beige curtains bulging like lungs newly fitted with ventilators. The early morning light streaked the wooden floor, bringing with it a cloud of glittering dust particles. She turned to her son. "Let's get started. Open the windows to let in the air, then clean." They set the water jug on the windowsill and ate the peanut butter sandwiches they had brought. Their first breakfast in the new house. Poor but windy, old but sunny. That afternoon, Morgan drove down to the town at the foot of the hill. The sign, Alder and Sons, hardware and feed, swayed in the wind. Inside Mrs. Alder, a woman with silver hair tied in a bun and a necklace of wooden beads, looked at Morgan through her round glasses. "Are you little Ellis?" She tilted her head. "I remember your mother. Every winter she bought pink salt to soak her feet." Morgan smiled. "I'm Morgan. I just bought the house on the windy hill." "Oh, the grey wooden house? The porch that almost fell off?" She raised her eyebrows and smiled, her eyes kind. "It's beautiful when the wind is right. What do you need?" Morgan bought a sickle, pruning shears, a handsaw, a stiff broom, black soap, white vinegar, a large garbage bag, gloves, and safety glasses. She hesitantly asked about the cheap cleaning crew. "Yes," Mrs. Alder nodded, as if she had been waiting for this question. "Jack Dalton, the good, gruff fellow from the High Ridge Hands. Iris, who paints and cleans the wood. Rowan, the forestry student who loves dirt like a cat loves the sun. And Miles, the roofer who's quick as the wind." She slid the card across the counter. "Say it was Mrs. Alder." Morgan called from the parking lot, briefly about the house, about her son, about the tight budget. Jack's voice was deep and warm. "We'll stop by for a free inspection this afternoon. Leave the windows open and leave the kettle on the stove. The wind is chilly in the afternoon." Morgan hung up, feeling her heart lighten as if a small knot had been untied. At 4 o'clock, the pickup screeched over gravel. Jack Dalton got out, a man in his 40s, broad-shouldered with big hands and thick calluses. Behind him were Iris, with short chestnut hair, Rowan in cloth gloves, and Miles in a woolen cap. They stood looking at the house for a moment, the eyes of someone who could read wind and wood. "Hello," Jack said first, then to the homeowner. "We're High Ridge Hands. Let's go around." They went from the porch, around to the back. The railing was rotten in places. The gutters were full of pine needles and moss. The windows were sagging on their hinges. The east corner of the roof had water stains. The backyard was a slope down to the valley. Morning glory and wild raspberries crowded together. Rowan picked up soil, squeezed it between her fingers and smelled it. Sandy soil. Drains well. Only hardened by weeds, still healthy underneath. Morgan talked about the budget. "We'll work out the hours, but we'll help as we go," Jack concluded. "What you can do, you do. We guide you. We divide the work into days. Day 1, clear the wind, clear the ground, remove vines, clean the gutters. Day 2, inside, cobwebs, floors, stove, Windows. Check the rafters. Day 3, roof and porch. Day 4, fence and porch lights. If the wind's too strong, we'll change the order. Morgan nodded. When do we start? Tomorrow morning, Iris replied, handing Morgan a list of drinks, spare gloves, and extra honey if you have any. The wind on the hill makes your throat dry. That night, Morgan and Theo lit a makeshift fireplace with dry wood collected from the garden. They opened a box of noodles for dinner, their backs against the cold wall. Theo whispered, I hear the house crackling like it's on fire. Morgan touched the wooden floor. It's the wood getting warm. Out there, the wind was no longer scary. It was like a big friend walked through the door, patted me on the shoulder and said, Okay, we'll do it again tomorrow. Day 1, opening the wind. Early morning, dew on the reeds was like salt. Jack and the crew arrived on time. Rowan's lawnmower hummed to life. The winch made a solid whirring sound as Miles set up the ladder. Morgan donned gloves, held a sickle. Theo, the water captain, with a thermos the size of his forearm and a drinking bell. Iris climbed onto the chair and cut the ivy that wrapped around the porch post. Cut to the lateral roots, she said, so it doesn't grow wildly. With each cut, the light penetrated the facade a finger's breadth deeper. Morgan ran the sickle across the grass near the stone steps, pulling at the white roots. The smell of fresh grass shot straight up to her nose, clean and proud. Miles swept pine needles from the gutters, scraped the moss with a trowel. The moss fell like black tea powder, broken into pieces. He tossed the whole lot onto a tub, tied it with rope. Moss holds water, he explained. It's beautiful, but it makes it overflow. Roofs have to breathe. Rowan discovered an old timber frame buried in the grass behind the house. Half gone now, but the joints still strong. Someone used to grow mulberries, he said, lifting it up to dry in the sun, showing Morgan how to clean it with a wire brush, how to condition the wood with linseed oil. Following him to collect fallen pine cones, he said he would make wind lamps out of rope and dried pine. Mid-afternoon, Mrs. Alder walked up the hill with a cane, carrying a basket of honey bread. Eat, the wind won't fill you. She sat on the porch steps, watching the young people laugh and talk, her eyes sparkling with tears. I thought that house wouldn't smile back. By noon, the facade revealed beautiful striped pine. The stone steps were visible all the way to 3 rungs. The windows could be opened 180 degrees. Morgan opened them wide. The wind blew in like water, pouring into a canal that had been blocked for years. Dust flew into the room in milky streaks, then settled. The silence of a few days ago now cracked, giving way to small sounds. Wood creaked, hinges creaked, the fireplace breathed. That afternoon, Jack lit a fire in the stove to test the chimney. The smoke went straight up, the kind that hadn't been used in a long time. Clean pipe, he smiled. You? Morgan smiled back, suddenly feeling a little clearer in his lungs. Day 2, inside, cleaning and woodworking. In the morning, Iris and Morgan removed the cobwebs with a long handle. Don't sweep hard, Iris said. Roll it up like a ball of thread. When you respect something old, it will go away. Morgan nodded, rolling up the grey lace. Theo took a feather duster and chased the dust from the old picture frames and bookcases. Rowan dragged the wool rug out into the yard and beat it with it. Billions of dust particles sprayed up like dry rain. Miles removed the window handles, soaked them in white vinegar, and rubbed them with salt to brighten the copper. Jack walked along the beams, tapping each section, listening for the response. The north side is fine. The east corner is squished, probably corroded. We'll reinforce it with a wooden beam. Morgan did the cooking. Black soap mixed with hot water, scrubbing each tile. The stove lid with wood ash mixed with vinegar. The clean smell spread, repelling the damp smell. She found a stuck kitchen drawer and used a thin knife to pry it open. The thin notebook fell out. Ivory paper, dark green cloth cover. Hillwind Notes, embroidered on the lid. Inside, in soft handwriting. If the wind is north, hang the blind on 3 west nails. If the night is damp, put salt in a cup on the windowsill. If your heart is unsettled, walk to the top of the ridge and count the moon's halos. Morgan paused, closed the notebook, and smoothed the cover. The notes were like instructions for the house on Windy Hill. Or for a heart. At noon, the team sat around the freshly cleaned fireplace, eating Morgan's reheated pea soup. Theo took out the Hillwind Notes notebook and read a passage aloud. Jack listened and laughed. Whoever wrote this knows the wind. Son, Read the next one about the south wind. Theo read, the south wind carries the scent of ripe raspberries. Place the rain barrel in the southeast corner to hear it fall. Rowan clapped her hands softly, her eyes shining. Very poetic. In the afternoon, they cleaned the windows until they were crystal clear. The valley at the foot of the hill appeared like a painting. The grasslands like carpets, the pine forests like green waves, the dirt roads curved with handles. Morgan looked out into the distance, saw the path of his life take shape again, no longer a long hazy line, but a winding path with real turns. The wind changed at night. Thick clouds swept over the ridge top, crawling down to the porch. Jack showed how to fasten the blinds. Iris showed how to tie them so the wind wouldn't blow them loose. They sat by the stove, listening to the wind roar on the porch. Theo leaned on his mother's shoulder and whispered, I like the sound of the wind when there's a fireplace. Day 3, roof and porch. In the morning, Miles donned his hard hat, strapped in his harness, and climbed onto the roof like a sure-footed cat. Jack stood below, holding the ladder, Morgan holding the rope. The rubber hammer hit the tiles with a pop-pop sound. Broken tiles were replaced, expanded nails were pulled out, and new ones were stapled. New gutters had a downspout leading to a moss-coloured rainwater tank. Under the porch, Iris and Theo scraped paint, filled cracks, and rolled on a coat of cream primer. The sequence of painting is listen, touch, fix, cover, Iris said. It's like writing a manuscript. Draft, edit, tap, then smooth. Morgan looked up and smiled. I used to teach writing. Maybe it's time to teach myself again. Rowan hammered in a wooden beam to reinforce the corner beam. The sound of nails biting into the wood was like a firm statement. Miles tried splashing water on the roof. Not a drop soaked into the ceiling. Dry as an old bone, he murmured. In the afternoon, they installed a new railing, smooth pine, round handrails, evenly spaced railing feet. Theo stood in the middle of the porch, sliding his hand along the handrail, his eyes bright as if he had just discovered a racetrack. Mom, I'll hang a wind vane here. He held up some pine cones strung on rope. Morgan nodded, writing in his notebook. Theo's wind vane, hill tune. At dusk, they strung a string of small bulbs between the porch and the birch tree next to the yard. The string of lights wasn't on yet, but it already looked like a low-lying galaxy. Jack stood back, squinting. The lights will be beautiful tonight. Day 4, fences, paths, and a veranda ceremony. In the morning, they rebuilt the fence around the eastern terrace. Straight wooden posts, taut wire, strong bracing. Rowan drew a zigzag path down to the cliff overlooking the valley, paved with flat stones. When you get tired, you go down there. Count the clouds, he said. Morgan thanked him. Cloud counting suddenly sounded like a remedy he could afford. At noon, Mrs. Alder returned, bringing herbal tea and a hand-embroidered tablecloth. "A veranda needs a tablecloth," she said. A few more neighbours came up. Mr. Whittaker, the blacksmith, Sophia, the seamstress, Ben, the milkman, each contributing a little. Scones, raspberry jam, goat cheese. Everyone wanted to see the house breathe again. In the afternoon, Jack and the team packed up. Made a handover report. Dry roof, gutters clear. Veranda solid, windows running smoothly, stove working, air vents are open. "But the house on the windy hill is never finished," Jack said, his voice a gentle reminder. "It will come back tomorrow. You listen, then continue." At dusk, Morgan spread an embroidered cloth on the wooden table on the porch, placed a stainless steel teapot, the only thing shining brightly in the sea of old wood, and a plate of raspberry cakes Mrs. Alder brought. She wrote a small sign and placed it against the wall. The ridge window, tea and stories, no price. A string of lights turned on. The golden light was evenly distributed, not too bright, not too stingy, just enough to make the wind want to stay. Everyone sat around the porch. Jack, Iris, Rowan, Miles, squeezed between neighbours. Theo ran back and forth pouring tea, tapping spoons on cups to signal changing narrators. Everyone told short stories. Mr. Whittaker told of forging a bell to hang the sheepfold in time for a snowstorm. Sophia told of the first stitch she sewed on her own wedding dress. Ben told of the winter milk delivery trip, when she had to light a fire in the truck to keep the milk from freezing. Each story was like a nail pinning a piece of memory to the porch. It was Morgan's turn. She stood on the porch steps, her hands shaking slightly, the wind blowing coolly across the back of her neck. "I left town at 18 to run fast. I came back at 38 to go slow. I brought a 10-year-old child with me and a bunch of questions that had no place in a small apartment in the city. I thought I would be embarrassed for going backwards. But on the windy hill, there is no before or after. There is only right or wrong wind direction. Thank you all for standing here as the first pickets of our new life together." No one applauded. They just raised their glasses. Theo whispered, "Mum is a better talker than I thought." Morgan laughed, an unforced laugh. The night, the wind was gentle. The string of lights swayed slowly. The pine cone wind vane. Theo hung made a clicking sound like a small drum. Everyone left, promising to bring some flower pots up to plant around the porch tomorrow. Jack stayed behind. "If the roof creaks, call. If the wind scares you, boil some water," he said, touching Morgan's arm lightly. The reassuring gesture of a roofer who knows how to comfort with what can be done right away. There were no fireworks in the following days, just a small schedule. In the morning, Morgan swept the porch, opened the south window according to Hillwind Notes, and placed a glass of salt on the windowsill when it was damp. She and Theo stripped moss from the stone steps, planted thyme along the path, and hung coat hooks from birch branches. Rowan brought 2 trays of plants, lavender and rosemary, which they planted in wooden tubs under the porch. Iris taught Morgan to wax the tabletop with beeswax, the sound of the towels rustling like a lullaby. One afternoon, the clouds gathered in a thread green colour. A north wind lingered over the hillside. Theo looked anxiously at the newly planted lavender plants. Morgan opened Hillwind Notes. North wind, hang the west blinds, light the stove candles, count the moon rings. She hung the blinds, lit the fireplace, cut a few sprigs of rosemary, and dropped them into the soup pot. That night, mother and daughter sat counting the moon rings through the window, each faint circle like a warm halo around their hearts. On Sundays, Morgan wrote in chalk on the small board. Thursday afternoon, tea and reading, 4:30, 6 sweater. The neighborhood kids, Ava, Lucas, Mia, shyly climbed the hill, carrying thin books and biscuits. Morgan read The Secret Garden, a story about a locked garden unlocked by children's hands, as if it were written for this very porch. When she reached the line, "If you look the right way, you can see that the whole world is a garden," the wind blew, a string of lights swaying gently. The kids fell silent. Theo whispered, "I think the wind likes books too." One day, a downpour came. The roof rustled, the gutters rumbled. Water poured into the tank with a pleasant thump, thump sound. Theo laughed. The sound of water falling on the note. Morgan watched the tank fill up, feeling a drop in her old anxiety. At least they had something for the dry season. Another afternoon, Morgan's mother called from the city. Her voice was weak but bright. "Do you hear the wind on the hill?" she asked. Morgan told of Jack, Iris, Rowan, Miles, Mrs. Alder, of the porch, of the Hillwind Notes. She listened quietly on the other end of the line, then said, "The day you left, I thought the wind had taken you. Turns out the wind was just taking you back to the hill." Sometimes the old fear still came back. The long night, the howling wind, the creaking porch. Morgan held her cup of tea, opened her notebook, and read. "If your heart is heavy, go to the top of the ridge." She put on her coat, turned on her flashlight, and led Theo on a walk. At the top, the valley opened up like a map of the sky. The wind was strong, but it no longer made her shiver. It pushed the rest of her mind away. Theo counted the lighthouses in the distance. 1, 2, 3. The lights at Miller's Farm. 4, 5. East Fork Trail. He traced the sky with his finger like a pen. They returned and slept soundly. At the end of the month, as the lavender began to bud purple, Morgan filed her receipts and notebooks. Her thin budget was filled with do-it-yourself work and help from others. She wrote at the top of the page, "House on Windy Hill. No need to be perfect, just breathe." Tea and Reed was busier that Thursday. Sophia brought a hand-sewing machine to patch the blinds. Mr. Whittaker adjusted the hinges on the back door. Ben put a basket of cheese on the table. Morgan made a large pot of tea, adding honey as Mary Older had instructed. She read a passage from Hillwind Notes, written in a different, more sturdy hand. If anyone comes back, teach them to listen to the wind first. It is the gentlest way to cure themselves. Jack stopped by, leaned against the railing and listened for a moment. He didn't go in, just looked at the roof, glanced at the gutters and nodded. Before he left a small package, a set of wrought iron hangers engraved with the small letters HRH, High Ridge Hands. "To hang the lights in winter," he said. "In the snow they fall easily." Morgan held the hooks, suddenly feeling warm and secure. At night, Morgan went out on the porch alone. The wind was light. The string of lights cast a golden light on her hand. She opened her notebook and wrote, "Today, the wind is south. The first lavender bud flutters. 2 more wind wings are hung. People tell stories. I am no longer ashamed." She stopped writing and listened. The house breathed, clear, even. No more tired groans, just a small rhythm of life repeating itself, like the way a hill climber knows how to place his foot on the right rock. The season of strong winds suddenly arrived one evening. The sky was dark, the clouds were running like horses. The string of lights was shaking, the porch was whistling. Morgan remembered Hillwind Notes. A strong west wind, lower the curtains, block the table legs, put away light things, light the fireplace with thick wood, read aloud. She called Theo. They did each task, like a ritual. Finally, Morgan opened The Secret Garden, read aloud in the roar of the wind. Each word was like a stake driven into the ground, keeping the house from being swept away by panic. Theo sat close to his mother, eyes wide open, not because of fear, but because he was listening. The wind passed. The sky cleared. The string of lights was still there. The porch was still there. Only one branch of lavender was broken. Theo picked up the broken branch, put it in a glass vase on the table and said, "This branch will smell good in the house." Morgan nodded. Everything lost outside could be returned by the smell of the house. It was a clear morning. The mist was as thin as a veil. Morgan and Theo stood on a rocky outcrop overlooking the valley. The sunlight had just touched the edge of the forest, gilt the pines. In the distance, the dirt road was a strip of glittering light. "When do you think our house is most beautiful?" Morgan asked. Theo tilted his head, thinking very seriously. "When the wind is tired," he said. "When the wind lies down on the porch to rest. That's when the house hears human voices." Morgan laughed, wrapping his arms around his son. The wind was tired. It was breathing softly. Somewhere the pine cone wind wings tapped softly, like a heart saying, "Still here." They returned to the porch. Morgan made the first batch of lavender tea, a little bitter but fragrant. She set 2 cups on the table, looked around. The new railing, the waxy tabletop, the yellow string lights, the curtains tucked to one side, the half-full rain barrel, the green rosemary pot. Each was a small gesture, but put together it made a life. In the middle of it all was her, the woman who had thought she could only run away. Now she knew to stay still and organize. She opened the notebook, wrote the last line of the month. The ridge window, open. Windy hill, calm. We, breathing. Then she closed the notebook, handed Theo a cup. They clinked their cups, a small ting, as if to call a quiet beginning. Overhead the clouds parted, revealing an impossibly blue sky. The wind gently lifted the curtains, crept across the porch, over the railing, through the less dry wood, carrying the scent of lavender, pine, and a little honey stuck to the rim of the cup. It went through the house, around the kitchen, brushed into the bedroom, and back out onto the porch, as if to check one last time that everything was in place. Morgan watched the wind, whispered, "Home." And the wind, in its own way, nodded.